The California Gold Rush of 1849 didn't just boost the American economy. It fueled explosive growth in the Bay Area. The discovery of gold brought approximately 300,000 people to California in less than 5 years. The population of San Francisco increased from a sleepy 200 in 1846 to a booming 36,000 in 1852. And all those people needed houses for their families and buildings for their businesses. Finding lumber wasn't hard. The bay was ringed by hills full of redwood trees that could be turned into lumber. The hard part was getting the lumber to the city. The best way to transport lumber was by ship. And one of the most convenient spots to load lumber onto ships was the place where Redwood Creek ran into the bay. It was here that a little port began to grow into the city we know today. It didn't take long for the rapidly developing area to organize. The county of San Mateo was established in 1856. The railroad reached town in 1863, and it quickly changed the character of Redwood City. It was cheaper and quicker to move freight on trains than on boats, and the city's business district began to build up around the depot and along the tracks. Naturally, the railroad also made travel easier for people too, and the town continued to expand.
Nobody built a railroad in those days for passenger only. Passenger became an adjunct, a physical feature of the railroad. And then, of course, just being in San Francisco helped.
At 4 p.m. on Sunday, April 10th, 1864, 4 years before the city officially incorporated, 80 people gathered in the main room of the old county courthouse to hold the first Episcopal service in Redwood City. They were led in worship by Father Giles Alexander Easton, who preached on Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 to 20. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations. Father Easton left a few memoirs of his early years.
I was born in Oneida County in western New York State in 1829. At 21, I moved to Smyrna, Delaware, where I joined the choir of Smyrna's Episcopal Church, St. Peter's. I was baptized there by Reverend S.T. Carpenter and confirmed by Bishop Lee. I was ordained in Middleton, Connecticut when I was 29, and I served several churches in Connecticut, Illinois, and Maryland. I visited California for the first time in 1854. In 1862, I was called to assist Bishop Kipp at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and in 1864, I was the missionary founder of 2 congregations on the peninsula. One became the Church of St. Matthew in San Mateo. The other was St. Peter's Church in Redwood City, which I named after the church in Smyrna, Delaware, where I was baptized.
The little Redwood City congregation had spirit, but it didn't have a home. For a while, the congregation met in the Congregational Meeting House and then in the public school. During the summer of 1865, the women of the congregation helped raise $500. The money was used to furnish a room in the courthouse, the parish's first permanent home, and to buy an organ. But members of the parish wanted a church building of their own. Fortunately, there was enough money left to purchase a parcel of land from J.V. Diller on what was then called Diller's Island, across Jefferson Avenue from the post office. A strawberry festival in the summer of 1866 raised an additional $75, which was used to buy lumber. The cornerstone of a new building was laid on May 4, 1867, with Bishop William Ingraham Kipp in attendance. Then, the men of the parish pitched in to construct what came to be called the Little Red Church. The San Mateo County Gazette wrote,
"The new Episcopal Church is beginning to assume shape, and although small, will be a neat and tasteful building when completed."
The building was finished on June 23, 1867, and was dedicated on June 30th. Total cost $2,142.70. The Little Red Church was modeled on the Church of the Advent in Brooklyn, Alameda County. The Little Red Church had 40 pews for rent at $40 per year. In 1867, 16 were rented, 11 at full price, 5 at a discount. In February of 1865, Reverend Dr. A.L. Brewer became St. Peter's second rector, dividing his time between Redwood City and San Mateo. The two congregations originally formed a single parish. After a few months, Reverend Brewer decided to devote himself full-time to the congregation in San Mateo. He oversaw construction of St. Matthew's first church building and founded St. Matthew's School. In October 1865, Reverend George Burton came to Redwood City to be the third rector of St. Peter's Church and the parish's first full-time rector. In 1867, Father Burton reported to the diocese.
In accordance with the wish of the parish at Redwood City, with the consent of Mr. Brewer, and by the advice of the bishop, the existing union of the parishes at Redwood City and San Mateo was dissolved, and on the 8th of November, 1866, I received the official consent of the bishop to take charge of this parish as rector.
The original vestry of St. Peter's met for the first time on May 1st, 1865. Its members included some of the community's wealthiest and most influential citizens. Benjamin G. Lathrop was chairman of the County Board of Supervisors and later helped found the Southern Pacific Railroad. His house, still standing near San Mateo County Center, is on the National Registry of Historic Places. Dr. S.S. Stambaugh was one of Redwood City's first physicians. Stambaugh Street is named for him. Among the church's first members were former Senator Milton Latham and his wife, who rode to church in a tandem carriage with a coachman in livery and a footman. It soon became clear that having a rectory would help attract priests, and that additional space could be used for meetings and social events. In 1872, the parish acquired the 5-room house next door to the church at a cost of $1,500. Soon, 4 more rooms were added at a cost of $700. The Little Red Church was sometimes busy and sometimes not. The County Gazette described some of the busy times.
Its spacious auditorium was the scene of many impressive ceremonies witnessed by the prominent church people of the county. In the 60s, the Feltons, W.J. Adams, the Selbys, and Senator Milton Latham and other notables of Menlo Park came to worship.
But after a while, other communities in the area formed their own parishes, making the longer trip to Redwood City unnecessary.
The peninsula is pretty affluent, right? And with only a couple of exceptions, Redwood City is really, I think, historically the only sort of blue-collar neighborhood or town on the peninsula. And it's been that way since its inception, right? You know, you look back at the papers and the parish was founded, and then not too short after that, there was a parish founded in San Mateo, and where did the people with most of the money go? You know, they went to San Mateo. Or then there were the folks coming to Redwood City from Menlo Park, but they didn't want to drive their carriages all that distance, so they built Holy Trinity in Menlo Park. So St. Peter's has always been, I think, very closely connected with the identity that the city of Redwood City has.
This had the effect of reducing the congregation. A parishioner painted the picture when he described his first visit to the church after moving to Redwood City several years later.
On the morning of our second Sunday, we started out and found the Little Red Church. It was about 11 a.m., saw no one approaching, no one near, and the door was closed. My wife says, "Be quiet and don't disturb the congregation." Opening the door, we saw 3 people, the minister, his wife, and her mother.
Another parishioner, Alma Labachat, later recalled those days.
We had so many lean years when I first attended St. Peter's. Ministers came and went so fast we were constantly having a farewell tea for one and a welcoming tea for another. To show you just how true this is, I can still remember the names of 11 ministers who served St. Peter's the first 25 years I was here. And even so, there were many months in between when we would have no rector at all. When we had no rector, students from the Divinity School, then in San Mateo, would come down and hold services for us.
The minutes of the vestry for April 14, 1879, reported that no services had been held at the church for 6 months. But the church, rectory, and land were unencumbered. As one church historian put it, the church was free of debt, but also free of income. The town continued to grow, and in fits and starts, so did the church. By the time St. Peter's celebrated its 50th anniversary in 1914, there were 106 families in the parish directory. The parish had a large and active Sunday school under Supervisor F.P. Thompson and a congregation that enjoyed fellowship and socializing. In the 1920s, the vestry and rector decided to move to a rapidly developing section called the Redwood Highlands on the west side of the railroad tracks. The decision was influenced by a parishioner in the real estate business, and the deal took a while to complete. Some parishioners objected that the new location was so far from town. Alma Labochat wrote,
Property beyond the highway had opened up for homes and was being sold rapidly. So this promoter sold our vestry on the idea of taking over a piece of land he was handling and build our church out in the park, as it was called then. The idea was a good one, but the timing was very bad inasmuch as we had not been able to raise enough money to even pay a minister a small salary regularly. In order to put the deal through, he of course had to sell the idea to the treasurer of the diocese, Mr. Lee. And I think he rued the day he put his name on that document because the diocese had to assume the whole debt, and they paid out many $1,000s in interest before the deal was cleaned up.
The formerly debt-free parish borrowed heavily. The Little Red Church and Rectory were sold for $15,000, but the cost to buy new property and build a new parish hall was high. Construction began in 1925, and expenses soon overran the available resources. Within 7 years, the church was $23,580 in the red. The original plan was for St. Peter's to build a sanctuary shortly after the parish hall was completed, but there was barely enough money for one building. Alma Labochat.
We purchased the whole corner where the church and parish house now stand, and we started as soon as possible on the parish house which was to be our church for 3 or 4 years. Well, those 3 or 4 years extended to be over 20 years.
By Christmas of 1925, the new building was almost finished. On December 23rd, the Sunday school performed a Christmas program to an audience of 150. Rector Albert E. Clay held the first service on Christmas Eve. The parish hall was formally dedicated on Sunday, January 24th. The Redwood City Standard wrote,
It is the aim to make the parish building a meeting place for dances, card parties, dinners, and numerous assemblages during the weekdays, and to make it a place of worship on Sunday by a simple arrangement of draperies which completely transforms the auditorium into a church.
It was a very handsome church for Sunday worship, with a beautiful brass eagle lectern donated by the Crow family. The building was used for many other purposes then, just as it is today. It became a theater for plays, a dining room for suppers, and a great place to hold a meeting. Throughout the Depression and through World War II, the parish house was the scene of weddings, funerals, services, and celebrations. The congregation continued to nurse the dream of building a dedicated sanctuary, but the resources weren't there. Having a sanctuary looked almost out of reach when the parish was forced to sell the land they'd been planning to build it on. Fortunately, a parishioner helped to keep the dream alive. Alma Labochat recalled,
We ran into financial difficulties, so we had to sell the corner lot to a German whose home adjoined our lot on the Brewster Street side. He built a beautiful garden there, but years later, after he had passed away, the lot was up for sale again. Arthur Poole, one of our very fine vestrymen at that time, bought the lot, and held it for us until we could pay him back. And that is how we were able to have a place to build our church when the time came.
Starting in the late 1940s, the parish began to feel more optimistic about its future. A number of arrows were pointing up. St. Peter's had survived a depression and a world war, and the congregation began to grow. In December of 1948, the vestry was able to pay the last installment on the lot at the corner of Clinton and Brewster. Arthur Poole sold the property back to the church for $4,000. The final payment of $800 was made possible, predictably, by a gift from the Women's Auxiliary. Another important event occurred in 1948, shortly after the parish called Reverend C. Peter Bowes to be its rector. Father Bowes took on the task of finally building the sanctuary, which the parish had been waiting for since 1925. The parish hired Kingsford Jones in Menlo Park to be the architect of the new building. The chief contractor was Howard J. White, Incorporated, of Palo Alto. For the basic form of the sanctuary, Jones chose the traditional shape of a barn, rectangular, spacious, and open, with exposed roof beams. This fit the dimensions of the lot and was a visual reminder of where Jesus' life began. So in a sense, the sanctuary's construction was a little like a barn raising. The design of the new sanctuary was unique for its time. The walls and roof were made of preformed panels of concrete blocks. Each panel was hoisted into place and secured in a framework of steel beams. The job went quickly, like a good barn raising should. Construction began in earnest just after Christmas in 1951, and by mid-January, the shell of the building was complete. The last piece of the puzzle was fitted into place on January 17, 1952. On April 13, 1952, Easter was celebrated for the last time in the parish hall. In December 1952, Christmas was celebrated for the first time in the new sanctuary. Cost to build the new sanctuary was budgeted at $100,000. In the end, the building and its furnishings cost about $150,000. The money was raised in an energetic, parish-wide canvass. Beyond its unique construction, several other features made the new sanctuary special. Among the most striking were stained glass windows by the renowned French artist Gabriel Lohr, whose work can be seen in churches around the world. The stained glass windows were installed in July 1956. The altar is made of natural stone and, in keeping with tradition, is built directly on the ground. The beautiful bas-relief just inside the sanctuary door was made by Francis Rich and installed in 1957. Parishioner Anne D. Stefano designed the candle holders and had them made locally at the Franciscan Forge. The Della Robbia bas-relief and the creche that's part of every Christmas were purchased by Father Bowes on his extensive travels in Europe. The building of the new sanctuary marked the beginning of the new phase for St. Peter's. Several decades of sustained growth. The post-war baby boom was beginning, and throughout America, churches of all denominations were the beneficiaries. Our parish was no exception. Beginning in the 1950s, St. Peter's welcomed more kids than we'd ever seen before, and their families. In 1955, we had 350 students enrolled in Sunday school. Confirmation classes had almost 100. In those days, it was fully expected that when a family came to church, Mom would wear a hat and gloves. Dad would wear a suit. Girls would wear dresses, and boys would wear ties. This boom in Sunday school students created a need for two things: teachers and classrooms. Teachers were parish volunteers.
When did you start teaching Sunday school? When was that?
A couple days after I started.
Caroline Arnold, who is 94, almost 95, she was one of the first persons that welcomed me, and she was in her 40s then. I mean, she was young, and she got me started teaching Sunday school. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm not that great theologically," but she said, "Well, we'll start you with first grade." Every room upstairs had a class.
For 50 years I taught Sunday school. 50.
I have to say, teaching Sunday school was a real eye-opener to me. At my Methodist church, we When I was growing up, we had to memorize scriptures and we did a lot of stuff, but you didn't really get into the meat of it. And preparing for classes for the kids, especially when I taught the 5th, 6th graders, combo class that we had, it really made you examine your faith and read more into the Bible instead of just a Sunday scriptures.
Classrooms were harder to find than teachers. In the early 1960s, Father Bo's successor, Father John Haviland, drew up plans that added upstairs and downstairs classrooms onto the south side of the parish hall, extended the north side to include new offices, and gave the congregation the plant we have today. The architect on the expansion project was John S. Rolls, who also designed the 8 mosaics that run along the Brewster side of the building. The top 4 mosaics represent the 4 Gospels. The bottom 4 symbolize the vows of baptism. The expansion was begun in 1961 and finished in 1962. It was dedicated in April 1962 by Bishop James A. Pike.